Y buenos días a todas.
Good morning to you all. We are starting the first block of the seminar, Peace and European Values as a Potential Model for Integration and Progress in a Global World, which will be chaired by Professor Jürgen Elbert, who's the Jean Monnet Chair of European History in the University of Cologne and member of the jury of these grants.
Thank you, Miguel. And another good morning from my side to you. We are a bit lacking behind time, and that's why I make the introduction very short. There's this old saying, you know, when you announce stars on the stage, the Academy proudly presents, in this case, Anna Milosevic, who is a joint PhD candidate in political science at the University of Leuven in Belgium and the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands. Taking into account her personal background, I'm not going to go into detail here. She is genuinely European, not only living it in her professional life, but also in her private life. And we are really looking forward to the paper she's going to give us today in acquis of European values, Europeanization, and collective memory. Anna, you've got the floor.
Hello, good day to you from myself as well. So, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, friends, it's really a privilege to be here today and to share with you some of the, let's say, findings, insights from my PhD, which I'm about to defend in the early 2018. So, my PhD is about how the process of European integration has affected our collective attitudes towards the past. So after listening to Sofia Corradi before, I'm also compelled to share a personal story. Namely, a few years ago, I found my old diary. So when I was a kid, I was living in Serbia, and I was writing a personal diary, and I think about 7 or 8, and I wrote this passage which actually speaks about predicting political elections in Serbia. And this was the time when Slobodan Milosevic was coming into power in Serbia. And strangely, today, reflecting on that period, I was really interested in political events at that time. And in that passage in my diary, I actually predict that he's going to come to power in Serbia and what this is going to mean to us. So given this kind of personal also experience in living in the Serbia, in the Balkans, the country which has changed its name for 4 or 5 times and also participated in different wars, I was always being interested into promoting the dialogue, learning what role exactly the past has in our lives today, what it means for the future, what it means for the present. So what I'm going to talk about today is actually one segment of my PhD thesis, which is going to discuss this relationship between Europeanization, on the one hand, and collective memory. But it's also a story about relationship between the past and the future. So I'm going to start with a brief outline of my talk for today. Oh. Okay. So the introduction, I already said like a few words about what is my PhD thesis about. Then I'm going to bring in the 2 main arguments of my paper. On the one hand, I call it like the memory is a foreign land. I will explain this. And then I introduce what I call the strategies towards the past. So what are the ways in which the politics makes the use of collective memories through politics of memory? And then I'm going to discuss this through my theoretical and empirical contribution on the topic of Europeanization of collective memory. And I'm going to do that by looking the consensus making on the past on European level, thus among the member states. And secondly, I'm going to look at how we externalize, how the European Union externalizes these shared moral and political attitudes towards the past. It's working now. Okay, thank you. So I think that every good presentation must start with a good quote. So I'm also starting today with a quote. And the quote is, "The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there." So I think that this sentence actually nicely summarizes the tensions between the history and memory. So what we do, we make excursions into the past, which is a foreign land, and we bring back to our present, we bring back with us souvenirs to keep the memory of that place alive. But not all pasts are eagerly visited. So this means that to some countries, we do not want to go back again. So the past is a foreign country. It's a persuasive argument and a really convincing metaphor which argues that our histories, either personal or national collective, are at the best half remembered and at the worst actively misinterpreted or pushed into oblivion. So I'm going to illustrate this by showing you something which is called Ngram. It's actually a service offered by Google, and it gives you a possibility to insert keywords, and then you can look these keywords, how many times they appeared in book titles since 1800s until today. So with this, I want to show you that the word past has been actively, increasingly present in book titles, in our dealings with, in our research. It has been really increasingly present. And if we look at back about the word present, well, the present is less present. So there has been this steep decline in our interest, scholarly interest into the present. Of course, if we look at how the past, present, and the future converge, we will see there are some important historical moments where the past was increasingly important, more important than the present or the future. And of course, this leaves us with the future, which is less present. So these graphs actually also led me to a conclusion that, or let's say better, a sort of a hypothesis, that the less future is certain, the more we travel to the past. Of course, some of you will recognize this gun. So this is the gun which was used in killing off Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. And I'm using this picture just to to make a provocation and ask, is the memory actually a loaded gun? So what this means. We're going to look at now, I will go back to this slide, okay, the process of European integration. So the European integration project was, as Jacques Delors said, an unidentified political object. So in my paper, I actually speak in favor of the argument that after a major ruptures with the history, such as, for example, a strong economic crisis, transformation of political conditions, or serious crisis or a war, we actually change the paradigm. We actually produce new norms. And in my paper, I also make the argument that the process of Europeanization and thus European integration was also a result of the change in these norms. So this is actually one of the key arguments of my paper, saying that there were these different kind of major ruptures in European history. And if you look at the European history and the creation of the European Union, we'll see that we are actually speaking about two major ruptures. The first rupture was, of course, the founding myth and the birth of the European Union from the ashes of the Second World War, which is the first paradigm. And then we had liberation and exit from totalitarian regimes in Central and Eastern Europe. I don't know whether it's really visible if you can follow the slides, but I'm already saying what's on the slides. So of course this, especially the second rupture with the past, the exit from totalitarian and authoritarian regimes after the 89, has produced what has been called in literature the memory boom in the 1990s. So with these two, let's say, hypotheses in mind, I produced this kind of a table which is explaining that in order to have agreement on the past, which is, I think, the main characteristics of European memory, we have harmonizing of the relations between the histories, narratives, discourses, mnemonic policies on European level, and they result in a production of shared normal, moral and political attitudes towards the past. So I will come back to this table again. So it would appear that initially the European integration came as an answer to foster stability, peace, and help to reconstruct the war-torn continent. So Europe has risen from the ashes of the Second World War, but to go forward, countries such as Germany had to critically look back into its immediate past. So Germany's decades-long reckoning with the past was also eagerly accepted by the other countries who in the past also collaborated with the Axis. What I'm also saying is that this critical gaze towards the past was needed both for the present but also for the future. So what came out of this dealing with the past and reckoning with the past in Germany in this period is the never again. So never again was said in the relation with, to the horrors of the Second World War and in particular to the Holocaust. So this is the first 0 hour, Stunde Null in the, let's say, European history, European integration from the very beginning. So in this respect, the Holocaust became the main pillar of this shared moral and political attitudes towards the past. It was grounded in the rejection of racism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia, and in the respect to human rights, rule of law, democracy, freedom, peace, and liberty. But if we rewind a bit, this really nice picture that I have here about the history of European integration, we can see that the end of the Cold War was actually the second most important moment in the history of the European Union. It symbolized not only the rupture with the previous paradigm, the one of communism, but it has also produced a shift in attitudes towards the past. So this is, there's no need to go into detail because it's really not very well visible. But this table is actually a table of memory policies produced by the European Parliament in the last 30 years. So what is important to mention here that these attitudes towards the Holocaust and the rejection of anti-Semitism were shared among the members of the European communities and expressed through several documents. So if we go back and we look at the treaties, it was also embedded in the treaties, but in relation to the European Parliament, in 86, only in 86, we see the first memory policy jointly created by the Council, the European Commission, and the European Parliament. What has happened since then is that after the EU accession of Central and Eastern Europe, we have seen a boom in creation of memory policies. So what I argue in my paper that actually creation of these shared moral and political attitudes towards the past can be observed through Europeanization theory, meaning that the European Union jointly produces shared attitudes toward the past, which are expressed through memory politics, resolutions, but also supported through financing mechanisms. And on the other hand, it externalizes them. So what this means for the countries who want to become the members of the European Union, it means that in the pre-accession, these countries are downloading, and it's actually a term used by political scientists, they download this soft acquis, this historical acquis of historical acquis. They download it, and after a while, when they become the members of the European Union, they also upload their own memories, their own discourses, mnemonic policies, etc., etc. And this is also a key explanation of why, after the boom of enlargement in Central and Eastern Europe, we had explosion of these memory policies, which deal in the first line with historical experiences of Central and Eastern Europe. So what is emerging as, let's say, a theme across these memory resolutions is the anti-totalitarian politics, which is actually, I would say, the second pillar of current EU memory politics. This anti-totalitarianism is actually rejection of communism, but also rejection of National Socialism and the fascist regimes, which are placed on the same level. But they're not placed on the same level, let's say, ideologically, but in respect to the victims who suffered their tragic destiny in the Second World War and after the Second World War. So these nice matryoshkas actually served me to say that in the last 20 years or so, there has been a lot of research on what constitutes European identities. And what has been the result of this research is the zero-sum nature of European identities, meaning that one can be Bavarian, it can be German, but it can also be European. But there was also increased interest since the European identity was seen mainly in cultural terms. There was a lot of interest to give a new meaning to the European identity, basing practically a lot of let's say, funding mechanisms on the interpretation of European identity as civic kind of identity. So this is a really nice table from Europe for Citizens program, which actually in a really plastic kind of way gives you a schematic overview of what is exactly a European identity and what the European Union wants to achieve with these funding mechanisms. And of course, we are not going to look into detail each and every one of this. I am only concerned with the one that actually deals with the remembrance. And dealing with the remembrance and promoting this so-called European reading of the past was also something which was made object of European Museum. The one which is now open in 2017 in Brussels is called the House of European History. So actually, when I was doing my master thesis, I was really interested in this museum, the House of European History. I wondered what they are going to put in this museum, how they are going to narrate the European history. Is it made only from tragic events, or are they going to put some kind of positive histories of European Union? So I did a research on it. And the idea for this museum actually came for then the president of the European Parliament, Hans-Gert Pöttering, and I interviewed him about these museums, but I also interviewed a lot of people who were against these museums. So what came as a result of this small project of mine for my thesis was that people had really divided opinion on what European history means. So for the Eurosceptics, for example, the ones that I interviewed, like Marine Le Pen, this museum was a clear attempt of the European Union to create a sort of historical revisionism, to give a different reading of history to promote its political objectives. For Hans-Gert Pöttering and for example, Vice President Martinez, who is a Spaniard himself, it was a way. It was a way to promote lessons that we learned from the past, which will enable us to live the future in peace. So I'm saying this because this project is now completed and the museum is open, and it raised a lot of attention. And it also embodies these memory policies created by the European Parliament. It is based on what I say is called consensus making on the past. And I'm coming back here to this slide. You have only to look the right-hand side. And this consensus making on the past actually means that different kind of narratives, different kind of views on the past are pacified through political action. So this is how the European history actually looks like, and I really like this picture. So you have like one object, and then, you know, from different kind of angles, you have different kind of views on this history. And of course, these kind of historical events that bind European nations are the object of European dealing with the past. So what European memory actually is, from identitarian point of view, it serves to say what we are not anymore and what we want to be. So we are moving from this negative template, we are moving towards the positive self-identification. And from historical, as a point of view, it's this set of shared moral and political attitudes towards the past of the 20th century. Because it is also important to mention that the European Union is not yet dealing with the colonial past, with different kind of memories which are not part of the 20th century. And from political point of view, it's what I call a key of European values. It's of new form, a new European reading of the past, which is used as a, let's say, a litmus test for European orientation of future members. So maybe we can look at also what this means for future member states, and we can look at the cases of countries in the Western Balkans. So what these kind of shared moral and political attitudes towards the past actually mean for the process of EU enlargement in the Western Balkans. So the history of the Western Balkans is really complicated, and I don't want to go into detail, but what we saw in the 1990s during the war and also after the war is that each nation, each country, each former Yugoslav republic firmly stood in the defense of their own view of the past. Every country had its own narrative about the past, about the dissolution of Yugoslavia, about the life in Yugoslavia. So these European models in dealing with the past, such as, for example, experience of Franco-German reconciliation, were employed during the process of Europeanization in the Western Balkans. So on the one hand, we had the strategy of stability seeking and peace preservation in the Western Balkans. And then we had the ICTY, which was the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which was used to jumpstart this dealing with the past of the 1990s. And in the words of some of the people that I interviewed on this topic, they hoped, the European Union hoped that this dealing with the past via tribunal will help the countries to leave the past behind and look towards the future. It will also support the processes of reconciliation. But if we look at closer this ICTY component of the acquis, like as in the rules which the countries had to comply with, one can see that there was a lot of political hesitance to start dealing with the past in the 1990s. And acts like politics of memory and symbolic, let's say, expression of attitudes like empathy with the victim, self-critical stance towards the past were employed by the political elites to express their European, is their sense of European identity, but also dedication to the European Union project. I'm really sorry, but this is really small letters. I don't know whether you can see, but it actually explains that there is, in the post-accession, there is a set of different kind of objectives which are pursued by the political actors in order to express their sense of Europeanness, their European identity, their belonging to Europe, their European dedication, and it is they use symbolic politics. They use the politics of memory to express their attitudes towards the past and thus towards the future. And this is also seen through organization of commemorations, production of memory laws, memory resolutions, and especially in discourses of political elites. And what we can see in the post-accession is that countries from the Western Balkans, if we look at that example, because I discussed already the Central and Eastern Europe, in 2013, when Croatia became the member of the European Union, the first thing they did, they organized a huge commemoration for the city of Vukovar in the European Parliament. And this was a really small and private initiative of few members of the European Parliament, but this in time grew to be a kind of a big event in the European Parliament, which actually gathers a lot of members of the European Parliament from different kind of countries. And this is one way of uploading your memory politics, your own memories of the war onto the EU level, seeking acknowledgement and recognition for the victimhood. And on the other side, they were also producing a lot of memory policies and a lot of policies in general, which were used as a sort of foreign policy tool against their former enemy, neighbor, Serbia. So what is also emerging as a result of this usage of memory in the EU level is that memories are also used as a foreign policy tool. So as I said, in the downloading phase, well, the national politics of memory seeks to comply with the broader EU memory framework. So European Parliament's memory framework is used as a template. And when there is an existence of EU model, of course, the potential candidate countries are complied or to seek compliance, they seek to adjust to the broader dominant memory frame. But this also gave rise to the politics of regret and symbolism, which is something that I already mentioned. But if we look at also how the European Commission in the downloading phase, that's in the pre-accession, how the European Commission externalizes its memory politics, it's done through several funding mechanisms. For example, in regards to the employment of Franco-German model reconciliation, on the one hand, you see that the Commission funds projects to create joint history books for the countries of the Western Balkans. And for example, there are numerous initiatives which are supported aiming to create transnational mnemonic practices to support research on dealing with the past, on especially dealing with the past of the communism, dealing with the past of the Holocaust across different countries. And this is what the European Union does. How the country responds to it, they also are looking for ways to create museums on the Holocaust, and there have been some authors who actually said that if you have a memorial and a museum on the Holocaust, this is a really positive sign that you are dealing with the past. I don't know how this is true, but these are some of the pictures that I prepare for you to show what this politics of regret actually means. So looking at this picture, this is a Serbian president going into Srebrenica to honor the victims of the Srebrenica genocide in 1995. It's actually, you will probably think of Willy Brandt. So this is employing the same model, the same kind of behavior to express your changed attitudes towards the past. But this is something which has been employed by different political parties and different political actors in the Balkans since 2000. But it is also important to remember that the European Parliament is dealing with the past expressed through resolutions do not deal just with the history of the member states. It also deals with the history of countries, for example, like Turkey or Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, Ukraine. There were several different kind of resolutions on Holodomor, which was the artificial famine in the 30s in Ukraine, on Armenian genocide, which has put some pressure to Turkey during the EU negotiations, let's say. And of course, on Serbia, there were two resolutions on Srebrenica. And at the end of these resolutions, as for example, in the last paragraph of these resolutions, there is a small passage that says that the president of the parliament instructs persons to deliver this resolution to the members of the national parliament, and it is, strongly encouraged that these potential member states comply with this memory framework, with this jointly shared attitudes towards the past. And of course, in Serbian case, there was a really difficult kind of adaptation to, in particular, recognition of Srebrenica as genocide, and I even wrote a book chapter on this. But there was also a lot of pressure from the parliament, from the commission, from the commissioner on the Serbian parliament to create this resolution, and to simply influence the political attitudes towards the, yeah, I saw it, but there's nothing I can do. Okay, so in the conclusion, because we are without slides, I would say that there has been a lot of interest in explaining what Europeanization of collective memory actually means. But there are a lot of people who say that Europeanization of memory is a sort of attempt of making a homogeneous kind of narrative of European past. But what the evidence actually shows is that the shared attitudes towards the past are based on a self-critical stance, and they are jointly negotiated between different actors who are members of the European Union. And these shared moral and political attitudes towards the past, or how I call it, the EU politics of memory, are important both for the present and also for the future. And they're distributed internally and externally. So for the countries who want to become the members of the European Union, these sets of attitudes serve as a sort of acquis of European values. They are the backbone of the EU integration process because these fundamental values are embedded in the acquis communautaire, but are also expressed through the politics of memory. I think I will stop there, but otherwise it's a lot of detail. Yes, this is it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much. I think you've tackled a very crucial point in European politics, European self-perception of member states and their role under the roof of the European Union. It's also related to the national histories of the member states. I mean, that's a problem of historiography, in principle, because as an own discipline, historical science has been developed along the lines of the nation state. And the European Union as a construction is something completely different. You may even look at it as a kind of alternative towards the nation state, not a replacement, because I think it's difficult to replace nation states, but as a second roof, as a sphere where nation states can try to live together and to apply different crisis management methods than have been applied before. I don't know whether you are aware of this. Just a few meters downhill, there's a German war cemetery.
I saw it, yeah.
If you haven't seen it, you should go there.
I saw the sign, yeah.
I mean, it is an interesting thing, and it is a proof that not so long ago the Europeans applied very harsh methods of coping with crisis. And having learned from this, we've developed different methods, peaceful methods. We've developed new structures. But there is a huge friction between the national self-perception and the application of history on the self-perception and living together under the European roof, under the common European roof. I don't see a clear-cut way how to solve this problem. I think it can only be solved by the time. But what we can do is trying to propose certain approaches towards history. And I think the examples you've given us from the House of European History in Brussels, just to point with a finger at the phenomenon that things can be interpreted completely differently, makes us think. And when we start thinking, we may even produce results, which is not the worst thing to produce, isn't it? So, yeah. That's my impression. And I thank you very much for this very interesting and challenging and stimulating paper. And I would now like to invite our audience to come forward with the questions. First and foremost, Eric Bussière.
Well, I wanted to ask you if you can precise 2 points. First, the building of a sort of consensus memory.
Yeah.
When you speak about that, you are telling us that Europe chose some common events, put the point of these events, and rebuilt a sort of common history for everybody. But you have also a second way, but perhaps it's a second way you mean. You take a national event and you reinsert the national events in the European project. On that last point, I have an anecdote. You have a speech of President Barroso about the April Revolution, 1974 in Portugal. For a lot of people here, the April Revolution 74 is forgotten, means nothing. But for Portuguese, it's a return of Portugal in a sort of common way in Europe through democracy. So you have a national fact, historic, with a very strong meaning in Portugal, in Spain also, I think, and the European project. So you can have two ways. First, you put some global facts, you reinsert them in the consensus you want to build, or you take national facts and you reinterpret them in the same way. No, I want to know if you have some something to tell about this. And also, did you selected some events that were pointed by European Union? What kind of decision? Why?
Yeah.
What were the meaning and the aims?
Yeah.
I think it's very important to know precise. So we can speak one day about this.
Do you want me to first reply? Yeah? Okay. So thank you very much for these three questions. They're really interesting. So, well, maybe I can start replying by the question on consensus making, so how it functions. So in my own experience with dealing with European institutions, and I also work with the European institutions, is that there is, on the one hand, there is existence of a model, and the countries, the European Union tries to use the model, its existing knowledge, its know-how, to apply to new cases and new kind of problems. But how the consensus on the past actually functions? Well, initially, the memory disputes are largely bilateral issues. So you have the same event which is viewed differently by two different countries and creates a tension among them. And this is also something that we have seen just recently. There was a Belgium, and Belgium wanted to make new coins, 2 euro coins, and they put the Waterloo battle on one side of the coin. And the French said, no, this is not possible. This is a trauma for us. The Waterloo battle, this is something terrible in French history. And for the Belgian people, it was something positive. So this is this kind of example of these events which are still embedded in the collective memory of today. But these memory works actually do not start in the European Union, and we can see that there are different kind of arenas for these memory battles or memory wars, these different democratic arenas for people, countries, political parties to negotiate and discuss dialogue on the past. And one of these arenas is the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, where actually all these memory policies have been debated a few years before in the Council of Europe. And there was also one of the former recipients of this research grant. Her name is Oriane Caligaro. And Oriane, she wrote a really interesting paper on this because the Council of Europe serves as a laboratory for further kind of elaborations within the European Parliament. And this consensus is made in the European Parliament through, I would say, party politics. Because if we go and see the discussions, especially after the Central Eastern European countries became members of the European Union, you can actually see who were the members of the European Parliament who asked for these policies. And they not only ask for policies, but they also select from their national histories what they believe are the most important memories, events which need to be recognized on the European level. So, for example, Hungary, For them, it was very important Hungarian uprising as a sort of precursor of what happened actually in '68. So it was the first democratic sign that the Hungary wanted to change, to exit from the communism. The people were struggling to live after the Second World War in this way. For the Poland and from maybe some other Baltic states, what emerged as the most important was to deal with the political legacy of the communism. So there were countries who were asking lustration. They were also aiming to recognize the movements like Solidarity, Solidarność in Poland. And these are also object of these memory policies on the European Parliament. So how it in practice functions, and that these members, who are normally the members of the European People's Party, they are the biggest group in the European Parliament, and they seek allegiances with, let's say, more leftist-oriented political parties, and jointly discuss what are these minimum common denominators. And this is minimum common denominator is the result of consensus making on the past, because you have to agree on something. And what they agreed on the memory of the communism and the memory of the Second World War is that the victims, the families, the huge number of people actually were the victims of both of these regimes. So they start from the victim when they narrate this shared history, shared view of totalitarian regimes, because in their own view, to the victim is indifferent who was the perpetrator. I'm not saying that I agree with this, but this is the dominant stance, this minimum common denominator. If you're the victim and there is another victim in another country, you are both victims on the same level.
I will give you the reference of the speech of Barroso, because he quoted not only this moment, but others. And in his mind, for instance, the discours de l'horloge, does it mean something for a Polish citizen? He don't know. So he wanted to tell us one moment and one event is as a signification, strong for in one country or in 2 or 3 countries, and the equivalent of the discours d'horloge for the Portuguese people was the Revolution of April. And the important moment for others are others' days. He quoted a few and gave some suggestions. I will give you the reference. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, but that is also now turned into a practical policy by the European Commission.
Yes, but Barroso was president of the Commission, and I think his text was strongly worked, you know. Strongly worked. It's not a quotation, a quick quotation. It was a strong discourse. I will give you, and I think you can have some more information.
I would like to see it, but also,
we will have it.
I would like to mention also that, for example, in the last 2 years, there have been a negotiation between the Council and the Commission on what further steps these financing instruments which deal with European members. These instruments are financing everything. People apply, NGOs apply, but it needed a clear direction. So they have selected a number of historical events important in European history, and each country proposed one important event. And then now you have this kind of really, I would also say a bit of also strange list of historical events. And each year there are 3 events which are like thematic kind of objects of this program. And for example, this year there was a Spanish Civil War. It was the war in Yugoslavia. And the third one, honestly, I don't remember. But for example, the next year it will be the First World War, and it will be the Hungarian uprising, and another one. So there is also this kind of priority of events which are tackled and financed, projects about it.
It's a problem for historians. eventization of history, taking it out of the context. You've got the next.
Yeah.
Hang on, just wait for the.
In terms of history, I'm wondering how is it possible, or even more, if it's possible or not, to build this collective memory when there is no consensus about it. I mean, for example, about the civil Spanish War, there is not even the consensus, not even the political voluntary to make this common history. How is it possible to make it, to build it all together?
Okay, thank you for this question. I will try to answer to your question, maybe by saying that what I have shown today is what is the politics of memory. So it is the memory, but it is seen as political utility of memory. What are you asking me is how to make a consensus on the past in a society. So this process entails also both political and societal need and will to deal with the past in order to reach a common national consensus on something what has happened. So basically what you're asking me is, how you can reconcile these different views on the past. So this is mainly a question of reconciliation. And I can maybe tell you an example. I work closely with the University of Barcelona, and I am a member of European Observatory on Memories. And we deal with different kind of projects. Among these projects, there is a really interesting project in Barcelona. It's about the female prison. There was, during Franco's time, there was this female prison. It's now where the big shopping mall is, El Inglés. And now they use this facility, which was once a female prison, to create a shopping mall. And the older ladies who were once imprisoned there and their kids, they started this beautiful initiative to make a living memorial to the victims who died in that prison, the ladies who were imprisoned there, who were like political prisoners. So I'm saying this because they go and they sit under the sun and they give pamphlets and leaflets to speak with young people going to the shopping mall, to inform them about this memory, about this past that Barcelona also had. And I'm saying this because this is an example of how societies create the impulse to deal with the past. And they're not creating only the impulse, they are uploading, to use the same language, they are uploading this impulse to the policymakers, decision makers. What is the result? The result is that the city officials in Barcelona, they came to see the monument that the ladies created. It is some kind of a spontaneous memorial. They came to see it. They came to support it. In time, they supported researchers to work on this topic, and they also are giving them money to create a permanent memorial. So this is, one of the examples that, how these initiatives bottom up and top down can interact and create something of what we call a real change, palpable change, palpable dealing with the past. But in order to reach a broader consensus in Spain in particular, I think that it also needs more of these bottom-up initiatives, but it also needs an ear with the political institution, but in Spain as elsewhere.
Further questions? Still half an hour left.
Thank you for your presentation. So my question is about the ICTY. Yeah. You said that in the European perspective, it will help those countries to get past the past. Mm-hmm. And while it has been a very effective policy to have indictees actually tried in the tribunal, I wanted to know if you knew about the impact in those countries. Has it actually helped societies to get past the past?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So with ICTY, ICTY is one of those objects that I showed, that has a different kind. It's the same object but different kind of views of it. Well, ICTY was a condition, in addition to the acquis communautaire, which was also for previous enlargement. ICTY was a special kind of condition for the Western Balkans, seeing that they come from a conflict. So with the tribunal, the original intention was that, by prosecuting the persons who are responsible, either in persona or have collective responsibility for the crimes, it will help dealing with the past. And they thought that, okay, we are going to prosecute these people. This is going to start the debate, societal debate on dealing with the past. And it will also help the victims, survivors, and their families to, make the first step in the foundation for the reconciliation. Now, this has been said since the very beginning and, for almost a decade. Now, with the ICTY closing, they're actually saying no. Reconciliation was never actually an objective of ICTY. And it didn't work as a support to reconciliation. What it had one major, let's say, a quality, ICTY. It was that it actually started, he challenged this ethno-national view of the past in Croatia and Serbia. And it actually resulted in several kind of interruptions on their EU path. For example, when the ICTY inducted Croatian general Gotovina, he was hiding, and the political elites were not, really convinced that they need to pursue this path of sending these generals to the Netherlands. The EU interrupted their EU path. The same thing happened in Serbia and several other places. It's also happening now in Kosovo. So the main message from the ICTY is that we are going to, international community is going to set up an example on how you should also, by your own self, deal with the past. So this means that on the one hand, there was the ICTY doing the first job, and then the EU, by promotion of political conditions and democratic conditions, in particular in the Balkans, they were enabling the rule of law. And this means that once that judiciary is strong enough in those countries themselves have to prosecute the war crimes, because it's not only the task of international community to do that, but this is also another way of showing that your society is politically and democratically mature enough to handle its own past. So it's also externalized to the rule of law. And now in Serbia and Croatia, you have domestic tribunals on local level in small cities that prosecute persons responsible for the war crimes. Does this answer your question, or? Yeah.
My question is related to events of tragedy. Like you've mentioned the Holocaust several times as a pillar of European Union policy and collective memory. Was wondering if you did some research on the tourism side of the memorial sites that deal with the Holocaust, like such places like the concentration camps and Auschwitz itself, and just the Central and Eastern part of Europe, like such as Hungary, Poland. Yeah. And if there are any laws of what kind of items are okay, or what kind of memorial services or places of memory are appropriate for the European Union, or what aren't? Like, is there anything like that in there?
Yeah, this
Or
is
is it just
yeah, interesting question. We discussed this in the bus yesterday, actually.
yeah?
Yeah, I did. I also recently wrote a really angry piece about that. And in this piece that I wrote, actually, I was looking the economic utility of memory. So what this means, I don't have time to discuss this more into detail, but this is a really interesting topic. This means that if we look at the countries of the Western Balkans as a post-conflict society, we can see that there is one big market of collective memories, but there are different kind of ethno-national political leaders who abuse them in different kind of situation. So there is one market, but so many different kind of nationalisms in the Balkan. But this is also true in the economic markets of the objects which are related with that memory. So if you go through Zagreb, if you go to Belgrade, and you want to buy like a magnet for your fridge, you're confronted with the choice of historical figures from recent and less recent past. So maybe on the one like tourist stand, you will see the person who was in the ICTY convicted of genocide. You will see a scientist. You will see a religious leader, and you will see maybe Slobodan Milosevic, who was a dictator, for example, in Serbia. In Croatia, you will also see this kind of similar figures, but from Croatian national milieu. So I thought about this first time when I was visiting memorials for the war veterans in Croatia, and I was driving with a colleague through all these smaller villages, and every village has its own memorial. Now, in front of every memorial, there were candles, but the candles were all the same. We drove through all Croatia, and they were all the same candles, the same trademark. And I thought, there are actually persons who created a lot of businesses on making these fridge magnets and the candles, but not only. The flags. I thought about flags because now everywhere you go in the Balkans, you see a national flag on the house, in the courtyard, on the church, in the front of the school, everywhere. And I thought about the 1990s. Well, growing up in Serbia, you could never see a national flag, Yugoslav flag. It was only reserved for public buildings. And now, with this maquetization, or I call it also Disneyfication of memory, now you have like one huge market, for all this nationalistic memorabilia, and not only nationalistic, it is also commemorative memorabilia, like the candles, the wreaths. So they are basically the same, but with different tags, and they are sold out through the whole region. So this is also economy of memory, which is visible, through this kind of examples that I gave to you, but it's also visible, for example, in making memorials for the persons who never actually were part of Serbia or Croatia. For example, in order to boost economic relations with Azerbaijan, the Serbian president decided a few years ago to make a huge statue to Aliyev, who is the father of the current president of Azerbaijan. So he created this memorial, and the memorial is there. The president of Azerbaijan came. He was really happy because his father has a monument in Serbia. This was an example of how to boost economic relations and diplomacy between Azerbaijan and Serbia. But it's also an example of this economy of memory, because it's not locally grounded. It doesn't mean anything if not, do ut des. I give something to you, you give something to me. So yeah, it's a complicated relationship.
Thank you.
Do you see, if I may ask a question myself, do you see an impact by the European Union, European institutions, on the member states with regard to changed attitude towards coping with the own national past, not to use it as a kind of quarry anymore, but trying to get a broader, more differentiated picture, which takes the opposition into account as well?
Well, I'm developing still the paper, but this is also the part of my paper because, you know, in order to have this kind of democratic consensus and, you know, you negotiate, you put forward the things that are more important, really important to you. But this is based on the principle of recognition of the suffering of the other. So this is also the essence of this, let's say, new approach towards dealing with the past, because it's a mutual acknowledgement, you know, and it's a basically a democratic consensus that it doesn't devaluate your suffering, your historical experience. It doesn't see you as a big country or a small country, but, you know, it puts on the same level the difficulties that we once had as a stark contrast to what we have today. So if you go to the House of European History and you enter the first floor, there are 5 floors, and you enter the first floor, you will see an exhibition of, you know, a typical household, you know, somewhere in 16th, 17th century, you know, how do people live in the Netherlands, how they live in different kind of regions of Europe. And it, you know, you go second floor, you will see the First World War, you will see the Second World War, that pistol that I showed you before that killed Franz Ferdinand. And then, you know, finally you arrive to the 5th floor where they speak about Brexit, you know. They brought like the referendum papers on Brexit, and they give really nice quotes of Tony Jude and other important scholars on the future of Europe. And, you know, it is an empty space because you can, you know, also write your own messages what you want Europe to be. So the last floor is what we want to be. It's open for interpretation. We can speak about, we can negotiate about the future that we want to have for Europe. But if you return to the first floor and you can see that this is all what we left behind. It's what we are not anymore in confront to the 5th floor, what we want to be. And the 5th floor is also really symbolically really glass kind of ceiling, and it's really nice. But they thought it really well while making that museum, because it, you know, it brings you to your own personal, you know, reflection about how you can contribute to the European project, what was our past, and, you know, what is going to be our future.
Okay. When you were speaking, I don't know if this question goes directly to your research, but all the time I was thinking why there are not true commissions in Europe, especially when I think in Spain. So maybe that's because I come from another part of the world where we have them. So why is that here there are not? Maybe you can give me some idea, because I really don't understand that.
Okay. When I started doing this PhD thesis, I spoke with my father and I told him what is going to be my topic, and he said, this is not a good topic. I said, why? It's a bar argument, you know, what is like European history, what binds us together? It's something you discuss in the bar. And I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying that I'm often receiving a lot of different questions about different aspects of history, and I'm always, you know, I can provide my own personal view from my own experience, but I'm not an expert in truth commissions. So this being said, I can tell you why we don't have truth commissions in the Western Balkans, for example. You know, the Second World War, what happened, maybe somebody else can talk about that. But in the Balkans, it's a political thing. Of course, it's a political thing, because when I spoke about this one market for so many nationalism, making a truth commission actually means that you are ready to deal with the past politically, as a society as well, and that you are and that you are also willing to punish persons who committed crimes. So in the Balkans, there was a lot of political responsibility for what happened in the 1990s. And unfortunately, if we look at the political elites of today, and we look at the political elites of the 1990s, many of those people are the same. There were some attempts of lustration in the Balkans, but as well in the Central Eastern Europe. But these attempts failed. And on the other hand, there has been this steady but really growing societal kind of demand to deal with the past. So what happened is that the political impulse to deal with the past was absent, and the societal was really, really low, but steadily growing. And there were a lot of civil society actors, external, but also from the region, who wanted to aid these societal impulses, to grow and to flourish and to take, the issue in their own hands. But these civil society organizations, foundations, they have been empowering, let's say, local actors. But the gap between the political and societal only grow. So in order to have like a truth commission, you have to have both sides agreeing on what to do, what is the direction, and why it is needed. And it's not only the national kind of thing, like maybe in Latin America, like you have a big country, then you have the truth commissions is a way of dealing with the past, in the country. It's a regional kind of thing, because there is dissensus, this disagreement on the national past on one level, and then you have among countries, there is, also this kind of disagreement on the past. So it's, yeah.
Remark, it's not a question. You had in the 80s, Jürgen, you remember that certainly, there was a program to write a Franco-German history book, and it was a success. So it's not a true commission. It was to be able to write the common history in a very dramatic moment with in the same language.
Pablo de Greff, you're saying?
The Franco-German history book was written by French, and they agree on the text.
Yep.
It's not a true commission at all. It's, I think it's an enormous political mistake to try a commission that kind. No, you write the common history when the moment is there. And second, this book was written after Franco-German reconciliation. Mm-hmm. I like much your, I think I'm correct, you speak about memory for the future.
Something like that,
because I think, after 1990, it was probably different. It was for a few countries a kind of anticipation. And the more you want to anticipate in that kind of context, the most you have to be selective and create the consensus, because the consensus you create is before the real change in the mind of people. It's not a question, but I think you have a few papers about the way the Franco-German history book was written. But that's perhaps you can find one or two ideas to compare. But it's
Yeah.
not a question.
Yeah, as I mentioned, there was this project, and the Commissioner Han, I spoke also with him about this, and because he is so enthusiastic. Oh, we gave another 2 million of euro for to make these books on joint history for the Western Balkans. He was so enthusiastic, and I said, yes, it's a good thing. It's a good book. I read it. It's a good because they were regional historians, and everybody of them gave a chapter on certain period of Balkan history. But what's the problem with this book? Nobody reads it. It's not part of any curricular. It's not like in Franco-German case. Because if you're a history teacher, you can go download the book or order the book, and you can, put it as a side book for your students, but you're not obliged. You can tell what you want, about this book, about these experiences, and also because national history books are changed every 3 or 4 years. And there is this scary tendency that they go even more into this ethno-nationalism, defending the memories of the 1990s war and one-sided narration of the war. So everybody has its own view of the same event. And in the region, like the Balkans, when you have like 6 or 7 countries, it becomes really confusing, having 7 different stories about one historical event.
I think there is no such thing as a general recipe how to create consensus on what could be considered as truth. I think that the time simply has to be there. The time has to be there. And there has to be a general mood to reach reconciliation within a society. If it's not there, you can write hundreds of thousands of pages. If people are not prepared to accept the results, or what is written in it, or even the recommendations, it doesn't work. I mean, the German, French-German attempt, I think it's pretty interesting and also stimulating one. But as you said,
Exactly.
I mean, the time was there. It was overdue.
Exactly.
It was in the air that such a book has to be written. For instance, with regard to German-Polish relations, we are not that far so far.
And there was a commission.
There still is a commission, and they've even got the sort of common German-Polish or Polish-German schoolbook commission, and the experts are well aware about the situation, but there is right now in the moment, at least, well, not in Germany, but on the other side of the Oder, there is no readiness to go further into detail with a project like this. Although research has been made they started in the late 1950s. So that's quite a while. It depends, obviously, on the degree of traumatic experiences, how long it takes to be ready to reach common consensus. I don't know. I mean, this is just my perception of things. No, you don't agree? Okay.
Just in 2 things, because when we had our True Commission, there wasn't a general agreement to do that True Commission. It was a political decision of the transition government. So, and although there's still people who doesn't believe in the True Commission, it had a political impact, and people is responding to what they did in that time. So I think it's really hard to have a consensus. As I think if it will be the objective, there won't be any True Commissions. But I think in that experience that I know, and in Chile as well, they have a positive consequences in the society. So that is from my perspective. I don't know, maybe for Europe, that's not the answer. But from our perspective, it was, I think, one of the best answers that we could have.
What is it? An international commission or national? It's not the same. National is not the same context than international between countries in Europe. It's not the same at all. It's not the same problem.
Maybe I can give you another example. There was like a few months ago, I'm always speaking in stories. A few months ago, from the European Commission, they called me and they said, do you want to come? Because we have a group from South Africa. They are coming. They are like peace practitioners and people. There is also one who was prosecuting, crimes in the Truth and Justice Commission in South Africa. But there were also members of the parliament from Zimbabwe, lawyers. It was a really interesting group. And I went there. I was all prepared to speak about reconciliation and about, and I spoke about the Western Balkans, more or less the things that I said even today. And afterwards, they asked me, said, this is so confusing. Why don't you do something as simple? You take a huge room, you bring a perpetrator, you bring him in front of the victims and let them tell each other what they want, and then he can be prosecuted. I said, this is not how it works. It doesn't work in the Balkans. You cannot do something like that. In Europe, it's impossible, just to put a perpetrator on a public display. But what he actually meant was you have to raise awareness, on the tragedy of these persons. And, you have to hear also what the perpetrator has to say in order for the victims to emancipate from their own grief, from their suffering, in order to move forward. Otherwise, they are not given any closure by the legal acts. One thing is the justice and the punishment of the perpetrator, but for the victims, there is still a void which is left by the trauma, by the violence. So this is this void that needs to be addressed as well by raising awareness on that.
Okay, maybe we take this as a closing statement if there are no further questions. The question now is how to organize the change of setting here on the stage. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.